Welcome to Bounce, Art Community Inspiration, a new podcast graciously supported by Coastline College, and in particular the Fine Arts Department and Gallery, David Michael Lee, Director. I'm Susan Petrella and I'm your host, and here with me today is Tom Dowling, renowned artist with Southern California and now I understand Irish roots. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. So, seeing that we've got kind of like three categories: art, kind of community inspiration. Let's talk about your art. I look and there's circles and there's rectangles and there's squares and a lot of wood. So, tell me about your art.
I've always been pretty committed to geometric abstraction, and over the years, it's just taken up. A lot of different turns and opportunities come up where I've introduced three-dimensional aspects, and I've more along the lines of a relief aspects to the paintings. And then more recently, the paintings are sort of held within an architectural context, and quite often I will add small sculptural items to it. They're some of the constructions are quite big, for wall art, 14, 15 feet long, 6 feet, 7 feet tall. But I still think of them as sort of maquettes for larger scale. I'd really like to go to, the real scale of architecture, to a building, maybe a two-story building, that sort of thing.
Do a work of art within that two-story building?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or create a two-story building out of your art.
I could do that too.
And does that come from anywhere? The architecture, the love of architecture?
Yeah, I've always had a connection to architecture, particularly modernist architecture. I am a kind of a dyed-in-the-wool modernist. My sort of intellectual roots and maybe even contextual go back to the early part of the 20th century. I'm still fascinated with, Picasso and Cubism and the Russian constructivists and the Bauhaus, and much of my work sort of, at least conceptually, starts there, and then I try and make it my own, manipulate it in different ways.
And you've taken that architecture, because you were telling me in our preview conversation that, you've constructed like studios for artists, and you use some of those same kind of, skills in kind of like other areas besides just the artwork.
Well, that was, certainly that interested me, doing building and construction to a certain degree. But really, that was the way I made a living. Early in my art-making career, well, even before I was anywhere near being an artist, I did a lot of house painting and remodeling, and as I got more and more involved in my art education and meeting artists and collectors and such, I took some of those skills into a realm where, a good 20 plus years I was designing and building galleries, and maybe not the whole gallery, but maybe it would be like the exhibition walls or the art storage situation, museums. Locally I worked at all the museums here or contracted with them. So those building skills have always, served me well in terms of helping me with the art that I want to make, but also helping me to make a living. Before, in my 30s and 40s, I was probably teaching at 3 or 4 or 5 schools, doing this exhibition design work for museums and galleries, and then also being pretty close to a full-time working artist as well. So I'm kind of a workaholic.
Okay.
So it all fit in for the most part. Not that there weren't ups and downs.
So is that same true today, being kind of like a workaholic? Because I know that, like Jane, I believe there's a home studio and.
Yes, I have a home studio, built it about 20 years ago. It's quite a structure. It's it's a beautiful space. It's a pleasure to work there. Although I don't have to, I'm retired from teaching, and I don't have to do construction on anybody's property except my own these days. I do. It's kind of a joke in the house. My studio is upstairs over the garage, and it's quite a big footprint. And most mornings I will just say to my wife, "See you later, honey, I'm going off to work." And I literally go upstairs. And then she doesn't really see me until around 5 or 6.
Okay.
And I am up and down the stairs, but for the most part, I'm working, I'm doing. The studio is really a clean space. So I do a lot of the painting and drawing and collage work up there. And then I use my backyard and my garage as a wood shop. And so the dirty work's downstairs, and then assembly and painting is upstairs.
Okay.
So,
Well, having a husband that's retired, that's probably a good thing for the wives. Okay, what are you going to do, dear? Go off and don't bother me.
yeah. Well, we're lucky. She's a writer, and she has a studio as well.
Oh, okay. So
So-
she goes off to work also.
Yeah,
Very
usually.
cool.
Yeah.
And you was telling me that with your Irish roots, you have kind of relocated and taken Irish citizenship in Ireland, and how has that changed your art? Or tell me about that.
Well, the pursuit of a life in Ireland has been pretty close to a lifelong dream for me. My family is 100% Irish, and I, of course, grew up with all these, stories and a sense of Irish community. But at the same time, there were aspects to my family, like my parents divorced when I was very young, so my father's whole side of the family I rarely saw, if at all. And I'm trying to create this idea of a balance. Here I am, trying to sort of find my whole family, and that led me to Ireland. And then Ireland, in a sense, became, I wouldn't say an obsession, but it became the goal. And, it was reinforced by the fact that I did, like Jane, I did a lot of study abroad programs. And so I was based in England for a couple of years, and that made Ireland easy access for me. So I literally, in the early 90s, I started going to Ireland regularly, every year, every 2 years, and just driving around. And, pre-internet days, I used to go to the different parishes where my ancestors came from and tried to look up them, it was hard to do. It was very hard to do in a satisfying way. It was just a whole lot of research and not much going on. Then the internet came along and made a lot of it easier. And all my grandparents were born in Ireland, so it was just a matter of putting the paperwork together to get Irish citizenship. And it's not just a cultural or, it's more than just trying to find my people, my connection to Ireland. It really goes to my ambition as an artist. I have for a long time wanted to take my art to Europe, and Ireland gives me a base to do that.
Okay.
I was on a pretty good path there, then COVID hit, and everything a lot of galleries over there closed and such. But I have a new gallery over there and some new opportunities, and I'm looking forward to it.
Has the work changed? The work is it different, the work that you do here in Southern California versus the work that you do in Ireland?
That's a really good question, and I struggled with that when I, obviously, when I was just visiting Ireland, even though it would be sometimes for 2 or 3 months at a time, the amount of work I did, artwork, was, usually on paper and not, and I just continued to do what I had been doing here. But when I bought a home in Ireland and created a studio, my intent was to let Ireland work upon me and see what would happen. And this is why the question's interesting, I think, in particular to ask me, is because I really tried to kind of open myself up to new influences, and basically that didn't happen.
Oh, interesting.
I kind of take what I do here and I extend it over there. In part, it's because of my process. For decades now, I've traveled a lot, and then even just being a teacher, I had a process by which, when school started, or I was off on a long adventure, travel adventure, I always leave work in the studio that's unfinished. And I, purposely, I will, like I'm about to leave for Ireland in about 2 weeks, and I have 3 really big pieces that I will take them probably about 2/3 towards finished, and then I'll just leave them, so that when I come back, I know where I left off. Things may change. I'm not adamant about other influences coming in, but then I'll be able to pick that work up. Likewise, in Ireland, in the studio there, I have 5 pieces that I left unfinished that are close to being finished, but not quite, so that I don't have to double think. I don't have to sit back and, where the hell was I, and what was I thinking then? And I come in and I take it on where I left off. And that, that's, my wife likes to call it sharpening my pencils. It's like, in a sense, sort of busy work. You go into the studio and you're thinking, what am I going to do? And so you sharpen pencils and you sweep the floor, and you kind of get yourself, you go through the rituals to get yourself to that sacred place where you're making art. Okay? So my process, what I have found, is that I can be gone for 2 months and come back into the studio, and within a short period of time just drop right back into what I was doing. It works for me. I don't know that it would work for everybody.
So you don't noodle it like while you're gone, like you don't think about that piece that kind of is left unfinished?
Oh yeah, sometimes I do.
Okay.
I have active sketchbooks, and these days I work mostly not in a sketchbook but on a yellow pad, legal yellow pad, because I go through so much paper and ideas and such.
And what about community? You were talking about, Irish and community and family. Do you see, have you found family in Ireland then, and have built kind of a community in the sense, or what about other artists?
Not family so much. That search still goes on. I have, this is kind of funny. I don't know if it's an aside or not, but for a few years, my family would rent this farmhouse from, it was like an Airbnb, and they had this beautiful farmhouse that overlooked the town of Glengarriff on Bantry Bay. And anyway, the woman who owns it, Julie O'Shea, she just became a really good friend, and we, and what I'm getting at is when I, about 2 years ago, I posted on the genealogical sites in Ireland, in my area of Ireland, West Cork, and you put your GED match numbers, and then others can look at it and see if there's a connection. And the only person who wound up a connection was Julie O'Shea, and I had known her for like 4 or 5 years, and yeah.
Oh, that's kind of wild.
Yeah, she's her text to me was, well, wouldn't you know it, we'd wind up to be cousins, So I mean, in Ireland, that's always kind of a surprise. I meet people who have my family names and such, and we always ponder over it. The community there, the art community the people are very friendly, very open. I know quite a few artists, but maybe not enough. I mean, I would like to get to know more. The area that I'm in is very rich in the arts. There's a lot of dance. There's a lot, obviously, it's Ireland. There's going to be a lot of music and theater. But the area that we live in has quite a lot of film people and a lot of writers, literature kind of writers. I like to call it the Irish Riviera, because it's on that southwest coast, and the weather in the summer is usually pretty good. This summer wasn't so good, but most summers.
Oh, yeah. Was it rainy or hot or?
Both.
Both.
And in fact, they're having their ideal summer right now in the fall. So, but I also feel that over there I'm kind of the new kid. Or the new old guy. and there's a certain amount of interest, whereas here, I'm not as well known as a lot of Southern California artists, but I'm somewhat known, and I think people already have something in their head. If they're in certainly the local art world, they kind of know what I do, and if they wanted a Tom Dowling, they probably already have one.
Okay.
So, there's that idea of a marketplace. Where do you sell your work? Where do you show it? That sort of thing.
We talked about that, and it was interesting that you mentioned that, here it's kind of, you've got to get a gallery, and, God forbid that you maybe, take a booth in a street art fair and, sell your work or whatever. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't ever do that because you're Tom Dowling here, but tell me about that. It's like there's a kind of a different.
It is, yeah. There's some pretty significant artists who you'll find them having a booth at the weekend marketplace, but it's, Ireland is very much like Italy and rural France in the sense that, there are village markets that, in my area, there's a ring of maybe 6 or 7 villages, towns and villages, and you can start on Thursday and go to one, and Friday's then another one, and sometimes you see the same people, but there's a couple of particular ones where you'll see a lot of artists, and booksellers and antique stores, and it's a much richer. Kind of reminds me of the old days in LA with like the Rose Bowl and some of the different street fairs. Early in my art career, I started off in ceramics, and I had a booth, and I went to the Westwood Street Fair. Was, I think, maybe the top street fair, certainly in Southern California. But I did some in Northern California, and that's a hard schlep, You're, especially with ceramics, you're picking up and putting down, and
yeah, that tent and getting there so early in the morning, and then going to like 1 or 2, and there would be a lot. So what are you planning for the future, both here and there? So you're going to go back, and you mentioned about galleries and about how COVID kind of shut that down. So are you looking for, are you moving forward with that and looking for
Yes,
galleries?
I have a gallery. It's Inanna Contemporary. They're in Skibbereen, which is it's not a village, it's a town, kind of a big town. They just secured a space for a gallery. Up until this point, I've shown with them a couple of times, and they would rent spaces for short periods of time, do pop-up kind of shows. But they're, it's a pretty significant cast of artists that they have. So I'm pleased to be a part of that. I was to have a show this fall, but I had some medical issues that everybody just decided, well, let's wait. Not that anyone thought I was going to die, but it was just like, well, let's not put any pressure on them. So I go back in a couple weeks for 2 months, and I'll be working towards the next show over there. And so in the meantime, I do have work up in this gallery, kind of, in the back room right now. But,
okay. Okay.
Yeah, and then, and I'm hoping to spread that out. My gallerist is not someone who is looking for exclusivity with me. He's a gallerist in the old-fashioned sense. He looks for connections to other galleries and museums and collectors, and he wants, he serves the artist pretty well. I'm very pleased with that. It's hard to find that here these days. There's only a few galleries that I think do that.
They want you more exclusive then to them versus really helping you to expand your presence.
Yeah.
And renown.
Yeah. I think the connection to Ireland, for one thing, has made I've recognized that I'm very ambitious, and I thought that had gone away. I've achieved a certain amount of whatever success in my life, and you just think as life goes on and you get older and you become more financially secure or whatever, that that at least I thought this, that the ambition to make more work, to want to show it, to promote it, to get it out there, that would start to diminish. Almost like you have your shot when you're younger, and if you don't quite do it, you can look at the art world and see lots of senior artists who made their name at let's say a more reasonable age, and they continue to do, and they're still regarded as serious artists. And then there's some of us who, kind of the next tier down, that maybe have continued to make art and had some success, but are not known on a wider. And yeah, kind of back to what I started with, which is I'm sort of surprised at how much ambition I have. I feel in many ways like I did in graduate school, where I just work constantly, make as much stuff as possible, edit it regularly, that's an important thing, and then try and get it out there. So
Well, we kind of have that culture here in the United States where you reach a certain age, 60s or 70s or whatever, and it's like, I don't know, you're supposed to kind of like disappear or whatever, or just, not have any kind of ambition anymore. You're just kind of supposed to fade, kind of like fade away into like the woodwork or whatever. Although, and women, more women, like I was just thinking Betty Starr comes to mind or whatever, she's like in her 90s and she's finally, especially some women are finally like, seeing who are like in their 90s or 80s, finally getting some recognition or whatever, or, from their work or whatever. But yeah, we have this whole culture of youth here that you reach a certain age and you're supposed to just, go away or whatever, and leave it to the younger ones.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's great. Well, I want to thank you. So, anything else you want to leave us with? Some grand statement about art, about your life?
Wherever you go, use your turn signals.
Oh,
I'm tired of you people not using your turn signals.
Oh, I'm so into that. I get so upset with when I'm driving, like, don't you have a turn signal? Thank
That's
you
all
very much.
all the wisdom I have.